And she was an American girl, raised on promises. She couldn't help thinking that there was a little more life somewhere else. After all, it was a great big world with lots of places to run to. Yeah, and she had to die trying. She had promised she was gonna keep. Oh yeah, all right. Take it easy, baby. Make it last all night. She was an American girl. What's up, Steve?
I love it, man.
I
give you like A+ for guts.
Oh God, I love you, Tom Petty. Oh man, welcome to the Greatness Machine.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Oh
yeah, I'm excited to be here.
We're going to chop it up in just a second. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest for you today. My man, Steve Gordon, is here. We're going to be chopping it up, talking about some amazing things. And for those of you guys that know the Greatness Machine, you guys know that we're about two things. People living their passions and people who are creating greatness in the world. My friend Steve here is both living his passions and creating greatness. So we'll be going there in just a second. Steve, do you mind if I do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll get rolling?
Go for it.
Awesome. Guys, first of all, welcome to the Greatness Machine. For those of you guys that have been on the show or seen the show, you guys know that this is live. So start a watch party, ask us questions, hit that like button, and go away from your screen, quit watching Trump and those dudes doing their thing at Congress and wasting everyone's time. Let's focus on what's in front of us right now, which is the Greatness Machine and learning from our friend Steve. So we're going to do a great hour here. And yeah, engage with us. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them. We stop in the show intermittently. If not, don't worry. Just listen along. We'll be having a little bit of fun. With that said, I want to jump into my guest today. His bio. Are you cool with that, Steve? I'm going to give your formalist bio, and I'm going to give a little bit of background too, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So guys, so here's how Steve and I met. So former guest Justin Breen. Justin, if you're watching, you know who you are. He's like the king of introductions. I mean, it's like it's embarrassing because I'm like, oh, I like to make 3 introductions a day. He's like, I like to make 10 introductions a day. I'm like, this is a competition. And but he meant it. He wasn't lying. The guy's like, I swear I got like 100 intros in like 10 days. I was like drowning in introductions. And I was like, it was amazing. But one of the great introductions I got made to was with Steve here. And I will tell you this, and I'm sure you could probably say this too about Justin Steve, is that he does not disappoint, man. This guy knows how to connect people. So I was very pumped to have him make the intro, and that's how we know each other. So it was a quick intro. But what do you have to say about Justin?
Oh my gosh! So Justin has become one of my new best friends. We've had this weird connection, like where we're two brains that were in search of each other. We think very much on the same wavelength. So, Justin, if you're watching, appreciate you, man. I appreciate you putting us together. And I got to tell you, I don't know how he does it. Like 10 introductions a day. I think it's 10 times that actually, because I think he's just constantly there connecting people, and and I struggle to keep up sometimes, but he's awesome.
Yeah, no, I definitely struggle to keep up. And now that I'm on Clubhouse with them, it's getting way worse. And I don't know if you're on that. We'll go there in a second. But guys, I want to do your formal bio. I always like to give how I've met people because for me, sometimes I'm just like, it's a lot of times it's in my network or it's slightly out of my network or it's an intro, but I always like to get a background because I think it's really interesting how people connect with one another in this world today. But I'm going to give your formal bio because I think that you've done some really cool things. You're working on some cool stuff, and I want our audience to know all about it. So guys, Steve is a serial entrepreneur, CEO, podcast host, and author. He's currently the founder of Unstoppable CEO, and he's helped create over 167 recognized experts in their field, and the Steve Gordon Marketing System, which has developed marketing strategy and client attraction systems for businesses in over 30 industries. He also has his new book that we'll be talking about here in just a second. And man, just all around badass. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
So if you don't mind that, I always love to do origin stories. Like walk us, like how did you, right now you have, an entrepreneur, you have this great business, you're doing a ton of podcasting and you wrote a book, but we don't start there. We kind of end there and then some. Where did you get started? How did you, where are you from? Tell us all about your life, man.
Yeah. So, gosh, going back to the old country now. So I live in Florida. I'd love to say I was a native Floridian, but I was actually born in Alaska, of all places. But basically grew up in Florida, spent my life here, and I'm loving being in the warm weather right now. I have lots of clients and friends who are freezing their tails off right now. I got started in business out of college. My background is engineering; it's technical. My degree is in a little tiny discipline of engineering called geomatics, which most people have never heard of.
No, can you tell us what that is?
It's kind of like measuring the Earth and mapping. And if
Cool.
you've used Google Earth, you can thank somebody with that background, but
Very cool.
or Google Maps. And I went to work for a tiny little consulting firm in that business right out of college. I was a 10th employee and was really fortunate. Timing was right. And turns out I ended up being the exit plan for the founder, and didn't know it at the time. So
Wow.
he kind of took me under his wing really from day one and mentored me. And 4 years later, I was 28. I got to take the firm over and kind of guide things and grow it from there.
Wow.
And so that's how I kind of got started on the business side of things, coming from that technical background, and did that for about 10 years and decided I really enjoyed the sales and marketing side of that. I really am fascinated by what it takes to get somebody to buy something that they don't wake up in the morning and want to buy. So for
Right.
most who are in any kind of a professional service, you're in that situation. You're selling this really expensive thing. People have to have a lot of trust in you, because they're investing a lot of money usually, and getting them to want to buy that when they woke up in the morning and wanted to buy an iPhone or, name whatever product of the day that they want, but they didn't wake up wanting you. And then kind of getting them through a process, to believe that you're the one, and that, they're ready. To me, that is fascinating, because if you really study that, you can reverse engineer how to make that happen. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
That's cool. So I'm new to this world, but I'm not new to sales. I grew up in sales, and I used to, I grew up in telemarketing and then sales, and then I ran my business, and I was always just kind of a sales person ish, like always had that sales side to me. But I love the sales process and the the engineering of the sale, right? And this is kind of a funny story. So growing up in telemarketing, like this was like my after school job in high school and college and stuff, was I telemarket. Once I was like an accomplished person, not to say telemarketers aren't accomplished, but that's like a minimum wage job type of deal. Once I had like a real business and I was growing it, I'd get these telemarketing calls like 15, 18 years ago, and I'd take them and I'd run them through their script, go through their objections and stuff like that. And just watch them like falter. And I'm like, all right, bud, slow down. Let's take a step back. I'm going to do my objection again. And they're like, I'm trying to sell you, man. I'm like, I know, I'm trying to teach you how to sell. And so what I always found really interesting and like really fascinating was the psychology of a sales process. And the reason I say that is I ended up growing some pretty large companies where I was pretty far away from the sales process. And then I ended up exiting those businesses, and I recently got into writing a book, and I'm launching a course and all this digital marketing. And so I get introduced to a friend of mine who's now a great friend of mine, and he's teaching me all about the marketing argument and taking people through a marketing argument. And we've been working on my marketing argument because I'm selling this very high-end product for like 5 months now, 4 months. It's been a very like deep dive, and long story short, it is amazing to see the engineering of a sales process in action, and the iteration, and then the testing. And I'm like, this is like any other product you would ever take to market, only it's done using the psychology of thought. Do you mind like touching on that? Because for me, I jumped right into it. I'm like, I fully get it, right? But I think a lot of people, and I don't want to say it's manipulation, but a lot of people, they need to be sold, right? You give them what they want, sell them what they need, right? But maybe walk us through your thoughts on this type of stuff.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's sort of this intersection of human behavioral psychology and in many ways engineering, because the way that you approach marketing today is really through this data-driven iterative process.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get that wrong because they think, well, I'll just come up with whatever my message is. And you see this in big businesses, you see this in small businesses.
Totally.
This is my message. This is what we do. It's generally internally focused, and they fail to recognize that the only people that have any real say in whether or not your marketing is any good are the people that are voting with dollars.
Right.
And the only way we know if it's any good isn't by having a meeting or brainstorming or doing anything behind the scenes. It's actually putting it out into the market and getting that data back.
Right.
And then adjusting. It's a scientific process. You have a hypothesis. I think this is the message. I think this is the profile of the market. I think this is the way we need to put it in front of them. Here's my hypothesis. Let's go do an experiment and either prove or disprove with data. And that's, to me, that was really what attracted me to it. But the other side of that is this, I hate to say softer side because it's really not, but it feels softer. And that's this behavioral psychology piece. So, people buy for all different motivations and reasons and different products for different reasons. Really getting in and understanding what that is, 5 levels deep, is to me the most fascinating thing.
Totally.
Because you learn so much about why people do what they do, how they behave. And if you go to that level, you actually end up a lot more successful along the way. It's when you try and stay at the surface, at the problem level. We describe it as in terms of like problems and consequences, and most people stop at the problem level. Problem is like the surface. The consequence is, well, how does that impact them? So what that they have this problem?
Right.
Do they care enough? Is it important enough for them to actually spend money to solve?
Well, it's funny. So Simon Sinek talks about this, right? People buy your why, right? And so, and I ended up hiring in my company. We hired an amazing CMO, as a former guest of the show, Barbara Yolis, and her husband was he ran a company, Campbell Ewald, which was a large ad agency out of Michigan. He was the CEO there. He was the chief creative who did like a rock for Chevy. And they did our brand architecture for my business. And I got to watch that whole process. And they're like, listen, people make decisions based off of what they make that emotional connection to the brand, right? And the most highest level dollar you can get is where there is a high tech, high emotion connection, right? Where people connect with you emotionally. And so it's funny to see these people on social, and I maybe want to hear your thoughts on this, where they're like, I'm going to make you millions of dollars. And they do all this cheesy bullshit. And the reality is like, I guess that sells to some people. I look at that and I'm like, where's the garbage can? I am much more of a person along the Simon Sinek side of this type of deal, which is people buy your why. And I think he does a really good analysis of this, saying that part of the brain that controls decision-making is the reptilian brain, and it has no capacity for language, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, when you start thinking of the marketing or the process or the things that you do, and it sounds like you come at this from a very scientific and technical perspective, and obviously overlaying that with the behavioral dynamics of human beings, how do you approach that? Like to make sure you kind of, again, attack it from the right perspective, but then from a practical perspective can deliver on results?
Well, so almost everybody wants to attack it from the tactical, side of things, because it's easier to talk about that. And, so, oh gosh, let's just run some Facebook ads,
right.
Let's have a direct mail campaign. How should we market this? And that's the wrong question to ask at the beginning. If you don't deeply dive into how that potential buyer is thinking, you're gonna have a hard time selling anything, no matter what method you use, because very likely your offer is going to be wrong. And what I've discovered over the years, and this is backed up by just about every leading direct response copywriter that I've ever learned anything from, is that the offer is about 85-90% of success.
Right.
And the only way to get the offer right is to match it with the psychology of the person that's buying. And so if you don't do that first, you're really going to have a long road ahead of you trying to make all these tactics work when the foundation is off. That's kind of when I look at what our mission is, it's really to help the type of businesses that we want to be a hero to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mechanics all become dramatically easier.
Right.
And so I think to start down that process, first thing you got to do, and it sounds so trivial, but most people want to jump over this. You really got to know who you're trying to sell to.
Yeah. Avatar, right? That's what we're told. Who's your avatar? Who's your buyer?
Who's your avatar? We call it ideal client, whoever it is.
Right.
If you can get it down to, I'm selling to Joe, or I'm selling to Beth or Mary. When you can get it to that point and you can actually sit down and sketch a picture of them, you can describe what their day is, day in and day out, and you're actually right.
Yeah.
Now you're really, I think, onto it. And, and then you can begin to build it from there, because you have to get inside their head.
Well, right. What's funny about that, and I love that you're saying that, is, who else is like that? Us. That's how we are, right? Like I don't buy shit because some guys come by. I'm like, so then someone comes and says, "Hey, you buy this?" I'm like, "Whoa, hey, slow your roll, buddy. Like, foreplay first, right?" But people do that. They come and they hard sell you up front. And I'm like, look, golden rule of life, whether you're dating, whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying a couch, no one wants to be hard sold, right? And to your
you can sell. Go ahead.
No, please. The not wanting to be hard sold is about me forcing that sale, right? There is no foot. Like, that's where a chargeback happens, because I'm like, I didn't do it because I wanted to do it. I did it because I felt cornered and I just wanted to get out of the situation, right? And I gave you my money to get me the hell out of there, No one wants to be hard sold. So I think that the best sale is, and God, I wish I had this article. There's a New Yorker article from 20 years ago where the guy describes the best salespeople. They look you in the eyes. They make you feel like they're in love with you. You don't know you're being sold because they're giving you what you need in a way that doesn't feel like it's manipulative. It's satisfying some sort of urge or some need. It creates value, right, in a way that you need it, and they're just moving you along through that process. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people mistake being hard sold with the speed of the sale.
Oh, okay.
I think anyway, because I think a lot of people want to get to the sale quickly, so they shortcut it and They default to these kind of clunky, moves that are borderline or not borderline manipulative.
Only 60 seconds left, and then the price doubles.
But it's an evergreen countdown. So you come back tomorrow and there's still 60 seconds left, and I think the easier way to do it, it's harder up front, but easier in the long run, is to get that deep level of understanding so that you can speak to that prospect and you're answering exactly the thing that's in their head, the exact concern that they have, the exact feeling that they're feeling as it relates to those consequences that they're facing. And they look at that and go, "Where have you been?"
Right.
And it's harder up front because it requires more work and does require usually some experimentation to really get that messaging right. But when you do that, I mean, if you think about what you're doing, you're not manipulating at that point. You're just putting in front of someone exactly what they want.
Right.
In a way that they can understand that it's what they want. Most people have what their customers want, but they put it out in front of them in a way that nobody can understand. It's completely unclear.
Totally. I love that. And what's interesting to me, and again, I come from the world of B2B sales, large enterprise clients. My clients, when I was running my company, were banks and credit unions, and the board would have to approve it. With some of our sales cycle was 3 years for one of our products. 3 years, you imagine? It's like a third of a decade. But to go from that into watching digital, which I'm like, it's the Wild West, right? And obviously it's more mature now than it was, 10 years ago. But when you look at digital sales, it is a speeding up of that sales process. And what I love about it, and what I love where you're going is that you get that instant feedback of, or am I giving the potential client what they need? Am I presenting to them the information? Because if it's not, I'm not going to sell anything, right? But if it is, and what I found, and going back to what you said earlier, and I want to kind of dive a little deeper on this one subject area, is a lot of people just go and put ads out because they want to get to the sale, right? But they don't really take the time to understand what the client wants so that they can present it in a way that they could potentially resonate with that client to get them to take action. And that foundation's broken, to your point, right? They don't understand the needs and wants and the data of a client. And so when people work with you guys, like, or yourself, or how do you work with people to help them through that, if you don't mind my asking?
Well, so the very first thing we do, we've developed this process over the last 10 years. We call it the ideal client focus. And it's a process that we take them through to help them really get clear, because, oftentimes when we're working with generally it's a professional, somebody who has been, they've invested a lot of money and a lot of time over the years to get some credentials so that they could go do a particular service. And so they sometimes default to thinking that the credential is what's going to make it for them. And it rarely does, and so they think, well, I've got the credential. I want to work with anybody and everybody that needs this thing. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to kind of get them over the mindset hump with that, where they actually get specific with it. And so that's a bit of a process, and it's not that it's hard to go through. It's that you're asking somebody to, in their mind, go from having infinite opportunity in front of them, I can work with anybody, right? To now saying, no, we're going to narrow it down as far as we possibly can. And so the best example of this is my longest term client has been with us since I started the firm, for, been with me for 10 years. He's having his best years ever. He's in financial services. And the reason he's having his best years ever these last 3 or 4 years is that we keep narrowing the definition of his ideal client. And when we do that,
can you give an example of? I know you don't need to, totally. But give some example of what a narrowing from A to B. What does that look like?
Okay, so he's a financial advisor. So he sells life insurance and investments and annuities and all that kind of stuff, right? And if you talk to most financial advisors, they'll tell you that, well, I can work with anybody with a heartbeat and a wallet. Right. Any living U.S. adult needs what I need, and I've had people tell me that before. And and so he has already narrowed to say, no, my real focus is people in my geographic area. So he's here locally where I am in Tallahassee, Florida. We're not a big city. We're like the, 10th largest city in Florida. So it's not a big place. And so he first narrowed it there. Then he narrowed it to say, okay, well, I really want to work with people who are part of the state retirement system, because we're the state capital, lots of people in the state retirement system. He's since narrowed it to say, I want to work with people who are faculty members at Florida State University.
Interesting.
All right. That's not a big pool of people, but guess what? What we found is that there's still more of them than he'll ever serve in a lifetime.
That makes so much sense.
Well, and what that allows you to do is, instead of having just generic, bland messaging, he can go out and say, he's created this process he calls the secure retirement method. And, we just actually finished doing a book for him that we'll have published here in another couple of weeks. But it's effectively like the secure retirement method. That's his kind of IP for members of the Florida retirement system. And what that does, when we put that in front of them, they go, oh my gosh, where have you been? That's exactly for me. Nobody else has ever done anything like that, because he's the only one with the guts to get that narrow.
What's his pool of potential clients? How big is that, would you guess?
So if we look at that smallest pool, it's under 10,000. I think it's under 5,000.
Okay, so let's say it's under 5,000. How many clients does he have right now?
If you look at his lifetime, he's been in business for a while, so he's probably got a little over 1,000 clients, but they're not all from that pool. But he's got a good chunk from that pool.
So let's say he's got 500 from that pool, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
That's still 10% market share. Which is like in any business, you would be like, that's legit, right? And at a certain, probably once he hits 15.5%, he's going to be like, he'll probably zoom up pretty quickly from there, because he'll hit that, that part on the the bell-shaped curve. But my gosh, it's funny because you're hitting on something. You just made me think of something really, really interesting. And I think that people, when they go into business, I could do anything, to your point. The whole world is my client. And you're like, yeah, let me tell you this. There's like a 99% chance of failing in business, right? And very few businesses don't even make it over $1 million. And I'm like, okay, let's say his average sale is $1,000, which is probably more than that, but let's say it's $1,000. He only needs 1,000 clients total out of a general population of 7 billion to get his $1 million business. And people sit there. I see people sit there and iterating, and they don't get narrow, and they have a $250,000 business. And I'm like, your business is $250,000. I could wake up in the morning and start a $250,000 business, And the reason for it, I think, is, to your point, people don't get narrow enough because, I have a friend who taught me this. Says, listen, Darius, there's riches in the niches, And I love that. I've always said that. I'm like, what's your niche? Like, who are you serving? Because that guy, if anyone has that issue in that area of those 10,000 people, I can guarantee you there's a pretty high likeliness who they're calling, right? It's the one guy that's serving.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? He doesn't even need to try.
Well, and I tell you, it simplifies everything else.
Say that again?
Yeah, so look, we talked about tactics before. It simplifies trying to figure out what tactic do I use to reach them. Right? Because if I'm dealing with that small of a focus group, guess what? I can afford every tactic because I'm not trying to spread my limited marketing resources across the world. I only need to hit these 5,000 people. So he makes out like a bandit with direct mail, which most people think is dead or too expensive. But he's doing that all day long.
What's his response rate on direct mail?
Varies depending on the type of piece, but it's generally he's trying to do direct mail to a webinar, or to get somebody to request a book. It's probably consistently in the 1% to 3%, which is not bad.
Yeah. No,
postcards.
That's solid on a postcard. Look, you're talking to someone that's done every piece of marketing. For those of you that don't know what we just said, the average that you should expect on direct mail, just general carpet bombing a list, is like 0.25% to 0.5%.
Yeah. Here's the thing though. It snowballs. So he does, because he's focused in this small area. He's got a podcast for that group.
Yep.
One of the things that we produce for him. He's got a book that he's had for a while that was more general. This one's now more specific. That'll be coming out. But because it's such a small group, he can do repetition in his marketing. So instead of doing, one direct mail piece, which I get it all the time. Somebody will do a direct mail piece, or they'll do an email, or they'll do a webinar, and it won't be a home run. And they'll go, well, that didn't work. So what should we do next? Like, well, you should just do that again.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you got one result, let's see if we can multiply it. And so they give up too soon. Well, he's able to just continue to hit this market again and again and again, where he becomes the household name because it's small enough. And that's really, I think, the secret. Now, a lot of people will balk at that. And this is why we have to do this mindset shift with a lot of clients at the beginning. They will balk at that because they think it's too limiting. Even though I can prove, like this guy. So this guy, just to give you a sense, for the last 3 or 4 years, has led the nation in annuity sales with 2 particular companies, national insurance companies that he sells their products. He beats people who are in New York City, who are in LA.
Wow.
Okay.
And that's a high ticket product too.
Yeah, and he's selling more than people in much bigger, more affluent markets, and it's all because of the focus. So, what that tells you is, it doesn't really matter what market you pick as long as it's a functioning market. You don't have to pick the perfect market. You just need to pick a market, get focused, and go, and then you can go out from there. So most of our clients end up with 2 or 3 what we would call ideal clients, and marketing that's specific, kind of siloed to each of them, and they've got a great diverse business that way.
Yeah.
And that's so much easier than starting out saying, I'm trying to market to the world.
Well, you beat me to the punch on that, because I was going to say to you, well, don't you have concentration risk? Let's say that state retirement group, like loses funding or something, or they blow up. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. But I love that that's the intention is build that ideal client, and depending on what it is, right? If, let's say my ideal client was like Navy, vets, there's probably not going to be a blow up in their pensions, right? Unless something really bad happens. If that really bad thing happens, then who gives a crap? It doesn't matter what we're saying then. If that group loses its funding, but yeah, it's people. This guy's in Tallahassee. You said,
yeah,
right. So what we're just talking about now is we have a guy, 10,000 people in his pool of clients who he carpet bombs, writes books to, creates high value marketing for, because he can get super narrow to figure out ways to create market value for them. He doesn't need to go and spread himself thin. Who's beating people and what's the population? 10,000. We're saying we're getting narrow at 10,000 of some person that's maybe approaching every person in New York City. And what's the population there? What, 11 million or something, right?
Yeah.
Like 20 million. I don't know. It's for sure 8 digit. So.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, if you were to tell me it's a numbers game, then I would say, what kind of numbers game, right? Because this sounds like it is a numbers game, but you need to go and find the 10,000 people. And I heard somebody just reminded me of something. Someone told me, would you rather have 100,000 followers, or would you rather have 1,000 of the perfect followers? And the answer is you should want the 1,000 perfect followers, because who'll buy everything from you. Right. And I think to your point, people sit there and, we live in a world where Kim Kardashian and Kanye West have their 5 billion followers, and everyone gets, I think it's a big lie that you got to go be that, because that's what gets revered and gets celebrated. When the reality is, if you really want to build success, go get narrow, go find those 100, go find 10 people that love what you do. Right. Then build that to 50, and then 100, and then 1,000, like your guy did. And before you know it, you're crushing it. So I love what you're saying with that. Do you mind if we take a hard left? Because I want to go into the podcasting, because I know it's a big part of what you do.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, let's talk about this. So you have a podcast. You're heavy into podcasts. You're helping people build podcasts. Let's talk podcasts. Oh.
Yeah, my podcast journey started actually back in 2012. I started a podcast. I ran it for a year. Because I was a little bit of a geek at the time, and I was listening to a lot of them. And this was before, the rest of the world came, to jump in on the podcasting thing, and it was great. And I went around and interviewed entrepreneurs, actually all over the world. And I was this little unknown guy. I hadn't written a book yet. I hadn't done anything really. And I found that I was able to really easily get people to say yes to jumping on at that time, Skype call with me and doing an interview. And then when they did, they'd share that. And, ultimately, I'd add some people to my list, and it worked pretty well for that year, but I got really busy and just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. Hadn't figured out how to put the team together to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I just dropped it. And a couple of years later, I wrote my first book, and went back to that group of people, because I developed relationships.
Oh, you're cutting out, buddy. Can we hear you? Can you hear me? Steve? Hello? We'll give him a second to get back here, guys. Such an interesting conversation we're having right now. Steve, can you hear us? This is the cool part about going live, right? If I wasn't live right now, you wouldn't even know this was happening. So, you guys, for those of you guys that are here right now and listening, we're talking about. Oh, there we are, Steve. You're back. We lost you, buddy. You cut out. So you were talking about, you circled back to the people who you had interviewed. You had built relationships with them, and then it cut out. So let's take it from the top.
Yeah. So this is kind of where I discovered the power of building relationships through the podcast. So 15 of these 52 people that I had connected with through the podcast agreed to help me promote this first book that I had written. At the time, I had my email list was maybe 1,000 people, and they agreed to help me promote this book. And literally the first week, we distributed 5,268 copies of the book.
Wow! Because
all of these people shared it. So far beyond it, any impact or influence that I could have brought to the table, these guys 5x'd that kind of footprint in the world for this book. And changed our business overnight. We doubled the business the next year. And, and so I kind of realized that relationships were the key. And it took a couple of years before I went back and rebuilt a podcast, but started in 2017 with the Unstoppable CEO podcast. And that's really, I love interviewing really smart people. That's fun. But my kind of ulterior motive is I use that as how I connect with people that I want in my network, because it's a way for me to go give value to them right out of the gate. Because I can say, look, I've got this audience. I think you're doing amazing things. I would love to take all of your expertise and put it on display for all of these people to see so they can learn about you. To get a business owner to say yes to that is absolutely easy.
Right. Hey, where do I sign up for that?
Right. Yeah. And so if you're selling B2B, I've just found that it is the most effective way to connect with the people that can help you. And that might be prospects. It might be, influencers or, referral sources or whatever. It might just be people that you admire that you want to be associated with. So, I got the opportunity less than a year into the podcast to interview Dan Sullivan, who's been somebody who has, I count him as a mentor, but we hadn't met before.
Wow.
I got to interview Perry Marshall, and a whole host of other folks that I never would have been able to get on the telephone, but they excitedly joined me on a Zoom call to do a podcast interview.
Yeah, someone was joking. They said 2017 was good. Let's go get a cup of coffee, and 2020 is let's hop on my podcast.
Yeah.
So I think the secret's out, but people are willing to do it if they know that they get some content out of it and potentially some distribution. And I love that approach. So how are you using that now in your business? Obviously, you're helping that with some of your clients. Do you mind kind of diving into that and letting us know how you're using that from a business perspective?
It's funny, the strategy sort of evolved over the years. So I in my first book, which is called Unstoppable Referrals, the one I referred to there, which I wrote in 2014, I had sort of the beginning pieces of this, but really hadn't pulled it all together. And every time I write a book, we just sort of refine the ideas a little further. So my last book, which came out just about a year ago, called Podcast Prospecting, really is where we have it dialed in. And what we've kind of figured out is that that if you use a podcast as a connection tool, it also is a great way for a really busy entrepreneur to get all their marketing done at once. And so what we tell our clients is you want to have probably the majority of your episodes be interviews, because you get somebody else to come in, help you create content, and you get to build a strategic relationship, which if you do that thoughtfully is going to pay dividends long-term in your business. But you also want to have episodes where it's maybe just you or you and somebody on your team talking about the unique things that you do, your philosophy and the way that you do things, so that you're getting your ideas out there so the ideas can go and sell for you.
Right.
And then the third thing that we want when we tell our clients this is how you want to structure it, is you want to go interview clients, because you'll create these most amazing long form testimonials and case studies that way. And most businesses don't do a good job collecting case studies. And so this is a real easy way to do it. That's fun.
You just reminded me of something. So I interviewed, do you mind if I interrupt you for a second?
No, go. Yeah.
I think you just gave a great example. I did this accidentally, just so you know. So I brought on Tucker Max, who runs Scribe Media, and I'm a client of theirs. I did their guided author program, which is where you write. There's one program where you work with their writers and you kind of co-write, and then there's one where you work with a coach and you write without a co-writer. And I did that one. And that one it's kind of a DIY. You're writing it yourself. And so, but I was like a model student, which, by the way, anyone that ever works with me, I have a coach right now who was on the show a couple weeks ago, Jeff Spencer. I told him, I said, man, I'm the best. I'm the most coachable person. So I get Tucker on the show, and I think I spent, it was weird. I just wanted to teach people about he's an interesting guy, and he sold 4 million books, and he's done this. He has a cool new business. And it was a 45-minute gush session about how awesome Scribe is, right? It's my show. So it accidentally happened. And he's like, Darius, would you mind coming and talking to all of our guided authors about your experience? And I'm like, yeah, of course. But I hadn't thought about that I'm a client. It was my show. So it just happened. It was reversed. But what if it went the other way? What if I had a client? I brought him on. I said, hey, I want to talk to you about what it's like working with me. And let's dive deep. Like, what are you learning? What are the things that are going well? And then I could say, oh, here, watch this 45-minute episode of me interviewing my top client about what we've been doing together. Right? It's totally different approach than like some canned bullshit video that's edited. No one wants to watch that stuff anyway. But yeah, I love it. So please carry on.
Yeah. So that's sort of how we think about creating the content for the podcast. But one of the things we discovered, so we sort of backed into producing podcasts for our clients. We had, our current podcast had been running for about a year, and we were really getting traction and success using all of these techniques. And we were doing workshops. So our clients would fly in once a quarter. We'd have a one-day workshop. We'd help them lay out kind of their marketing strategy, basically tell them, okay, here's what you need to do. And we'd give them the whole strategy, and then they'd go away and try and do it. And they kept coming back going, this is really great, but I don't know how to do any of this. My team doesn't know how to do any of this. And I finally just said to one client who came back for like 3 quarters in a row with the same activity left to do. I'm like, what if we just did that for you? Would that be useful? It's like, oh my God, that'd be the best. And so we started producing the podcasts for clients.
Yeah.
And just saying, look, you just show up and talk. We'll do all the rest. We'll do the back end stuff. We send a little physical gift out to the guests, because I've been on over 100 podcasts and I never get anything. But oftentimes you barely get, like, you guys are awesome. By the way, the prep that you do is probably some of the best I've ever seen.
Oh, Jade, that's all you, honey. Great work. You rock.
Yeah, I'm serious. Most of the time you barely get an email or a calendar invite with a link, to join. But so we do, we're going to take notes on some of the things you guys are doing digitally. But one of the things we do is we send this box out. And the great thing about that is it really kind of juices the relationship. So it gets there before the interview, and it's got this little gift in it. And you hear the guests always say, oh, the gift was amazing. Thank you so much. And kind of gets that relationship started, because that's what it's all about. But the other thing that it does is, for somebody who's like already, doing 50, 60, 70 hours a week as an entrepreneur, and you still need to get your marketing done, it gives you a way to do marketing that you'll never miss. If you've got an appointment on the calendar with a strategic prospect or with a client, and it's an appointment on the calendar, you're going to show up and you're going to do that, because it's it's a key strategic activity. We're just going to record it, take the recording, and repurpose it as all of your marketing content. So that becomes your email marketing on a weekly basis, becomes your social media posts that get, rotated around forever. And it just gives you this really great stuff. And occasionally we'll, get with a client and get them organized enough around the episodes where they're sharing their ideas to do that in a way that we can repurpose that into a book. So we get a lot of use out of really very little effort on the part of the entrepreneur. Maybe they spend, 3 or 4 hours a month doing, showing up and doing the interviews, and then we kind of take care of the rest. And so that's one of the ways we use it. But the other tool, and I'm glad you mentioned Tucker, because they've got a great program. And one of the things that we've found to be true about podcasts is that they're not great for lead generation. They're really amazing for lead conversion, but it's hard to get somebody into your world or at least get a lot of people into your world with the podcast. And so you need some other thing. And the other thing that we found that works better than anything else is a book. So one of the things we do for clients is different than what Tucker and those guys do, is we create what we call lead generating books. And these are short little books. They're designed to be about a 45-minute to an hour read, and and really focused on laying out the case for the transformation that you do for a client. And so that's a great way to get somebody to raise a hand and get in your world. And then you've got all this great content in the podcast that gets them to trust you, gets them familiar with you. They hear your voice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they feel like they know you after a little while. And so for high-end sales where what you're selling is complex, we found that that combination of tools is really one of the best.
Yeah, no, it's really smart. And I know there's I have a friend that does some of this stuff, but I love the way you're approaching it. And we're converting this show. I'm working with him. He's a past guest from the show, but I don't want to plug a competitor. So, but I'm working with a gentleman that does something like similar to yours, and he introduced me to the idea of the solo, right? Which is you were just talking about that a second ago. But I love the top of funnel, that sales argument, that solving that problem through a book, because to your point, when we're doing solos or when we're teaching about the product, which is really, this is all around really gifting information, right? It's around teaching what your beliefs are, and forget about selling for a second, right? When I wrote my book, by the way, Steve, you're going to appreciate this. I wasn't planning on doing any of this stuff. I was still CEO of a 1,000-person company. I was just doing it because I kept talking about it, and I believe the core values are the language of scale and language of accountability, and people kept asking me about it, and I said, well, why don't I just write a book about it, right? So then I went the other way. I'd already done the book, and then I did a podcast to help promote the book launch, and here I am now with the book and a podcast, and I decided, I want to convert the live stream to a podcast, and I was surprised by the part which you just talked about, which was, well, yeah, 50% of it could be me interviewing someone like Steve, which is totally informational, and you get a good, like anyone that watches a few of my shows has a pretty good sense of who I am as a human being. Like you just know it. Like I'm pretty, you see it. And maybe other people that are more polished, maybe they're more self-edit a lot more. You know, they put on more of a performance in that way, like where they're putting on their business face, right? I don't give a fuck. So for me, I put on the Darius face. So any client that listens to this knows who they're working with, right? And you know authenticity when you hear it. And a lot of people want that. But to your point, when they do those solos, which is the thing I just learned, I did a solo, by the way, a 7-minute solo this morning. You know what it was? You want me to tell you what it was about?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, so I have to do these solos because I already have my guys like, Darius, we don't have an issue with you creating content because I love doing shows. So I mean, like, it's my favorite. This is my favorite hour of my week outside of hanging out with my wife and kids. I love doing shows. This is like, I look forward to every show. I look forward to picking the song I'm going to sing. I look forward to seeing if it's awkward or not. I look forward to learning about my guest. I look forward to about just having a cool conversation. But so for me, creating content's not a big deal, which it sounds like it is for a lot of other people for obvious reasons, right? The solos was the new thing for me. So this morning, I have a call with a friend of mine, and we have an accountability call every morning. We get on the phone. We learn this through Marshall Goldsmith. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he does the thing where you ask each other you have an accountability partner, you get on the phone, you ask each other 6 questions. And once you get that down, you can bump it up. So we ask each other 44 questions every morning. It takes 8 minutes, and it's life-changing. Like, one of my questions is, did I make my wife a meal today? And a lot of times I say no, and then I got to own it, right? Did I make my bed? You know, like, why? Because I want to make my bed. I want to have that discipline. Why? Because I tell my kids to make their bed, and I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? Did I take out the trash? Is one of my questions. Was I kind to myself? All these questions, right? So we get done with our questions this morning, and Ash and I are on the phone. Gosh, I'm giving away his name now. All right, Smash, not Ash. And so Ash goes to me, I have a question for you. I have a question for you, Darius. I want to hear your thoughts on this. I said, yeah, sure, go for it, man. He goes, I want my employees to take on more ownership in the business. What are some ideas you have on how to do that? And I said, well, what are your thoughts? And he's like, maybe we could redesign the compensation plan. And I said, I think that's one part of it, but I don't think that's the answer. He said, well, what do you think is the answer? I said, I know what the answer is, but I'm going to tell you that what you said is one part of it. You want to know what I think the answer is? And I said, I don't want to give you advice. I'm going to give you my experience share. So, okay, go for it. I said, I believe that you cannot teach someone to take ownership. They either want to do it or they don't. Mm-hmm. So the only way I could get people to do it is by aligning people into the organization who share my same fundamental belief of taking ownership of their job. We know when we have those people, they just do it naturally. They're the person that shows up early and stays late, and they care, and they'll go to bat and they'll take bullets for you, just as you would when you run your business. And I believe the only way you can get there is to be explicit in your core values of having a core value around ownership, and then make it come to life in the organization, which my book teaches about how to do that, right? Anyway, my point is you have to make it a core value. You got to bring it to life in the organization. I teach you how to do that. There's a way to do that. And then you got to incentivize them. You can't say, hey, I want you to take ownership, but I'm going to treat you like an employee. You got to create compensation plans that align to ownership behavior. And when they're doing that behavior and it creates additional profit, have you ever heard of the book, The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack?
I have, yeah. I've read it.
Yeah, great book, right? So
Yep.
Jack Stack, I asked that. I said, hey, have you heard of Jack Stack? And he hadn't heard of him, but he's like super connected in the EO and YPO world, which is funny. He didn't know Jack Stack because Jack Stack's pretty deep in that world. And I said, Jack Stack says that you just make them self-funded. If I want to hit one metric of return, let's say $1 is my baseline profit, and I want to go to $1.10. Well, it's not that I give them an extra bonus at $1 because I'm already at $1. I tell them if I hit that $1.10, I'll give you 20 cents on the dollar. They self-fund it for themselves. And now you're treating them like an owner. And I said, so listen, you got to make a core value of ownership come to life in your business, and then you got to incentivize them for it. And if you do that, then you got to weed out the people that don't want to be owners. And you got to attract more of the people that do. And the only way I know to do that is through core values. So that was my solo, by the way. I just redid my solo for you.
And I just want to call everybody's attention to the fact that if you have a team and you are interested in figuring out how to get them to be acting more like owners, that's exactly the way to do it. We went down that path in my first business, and we did a pretty good job of it, I think. And that's exactly the way that it came about. And I think it's key to growing a successful business.
Totally. I want people to take ownership of my business, and I want to incentivize them too. And I want them to care if it fails, because then I have a team that has my back and our interests are aligned. You know what I mean? And so anyway, I love your process, because I love the fact that your background is amazing, coming from this super technical engineering background, and then to parlay it into this business. And the way Steve, the way you talk about this is just amazing to me, where you've laid the pieces out and iterated and optimized it into this package that really demystifies the process of how do you get, retain, and grow a customer base that's loyal to what it is that you're trying to sell. So kudos to you for that, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man, well, that 45 minutes, 52 minutes flew by. Let's do this. Let's get wrapped up here. If you don't mind, stay on when we get off. But why don't we plug where we can find you? I know that Jade has put some of the stuff in there, but why don't you tell the audience where they can find you, what products they can get, how you can help them. I know we've talked a lot about that, and then we'll get wrapped up and we'll be on our way.
Yeah, absolutely. So our kind of home base is at unstoppableceo.net. You find our podcast there. You can find out how we help people create books and create podcasts. We help people with a complete done for you, so hands off, and we kind of take it all. And for folks who maybe aren't at that level yet, then we've also got a program where it's a guided program where we sort of, do it with you. And so, again, we are there to be a hero to folks who are really smart and qualified, and probably didn't get into business because they wanted to be in sales. They got into business because they were expert at something and wanted to go solve that problem. And so that's who we really help. But I would love to give, if it's useful for everybody watching, Darius, I'd love to give everybody a copy of my latest book, Podcast Prospecting. We talked about it, and I don't want to leave them kind of hanging on that. But if you go to unstoppableceo.net/podcast prospecting, you can get a free copy of the book, and or you can just go to our main website, click free book, and you can download it there. And hope that helps folks, particularly now that trade shows aren't happening, and the networking groups that you used to go to aren't meeting. If you need a way to connect with folks without being in a big group, that might be the way to do it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this value today. Blew my mind. I love talking about all these different things. I love all the value you're creating in the world. That's what the Greatness Machine is all about. And you definitely are doing that. So thank you so much for that, Steve. I really appreciate having you here as a guest, my friend. So much gratitude. Guys, wow, what a great show. We have a big week next week. We got Justin Donald coming on to promote his new book. We got Rick Gerard also to promote his new book. So we got a couple heavy hitters coming in here to promote their books and what they're doing. And they also have shows as well. So I'm excited to have them on. With that said, guys, don't be afraid. Follow us on social media. You go to my website, therealdarius.com. Hit us up on all the social. Follow us on YouTube. And also here at The Real Darius M on Facebook. And don't be afraid, it's a new year. Get your core values straight. Read your core value equation. Go online. Give me some reviews. Good ones, I hope. And with that said, guys, tonight on Clubhouse, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, Sergio Fernandez de Cordova and I are going to be talking about impact and how us conscious leaders need to step up and create more impact in the world. So if you're on at Clubhouse tonight, check us out. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. It's my first show on that, so I'm pumped to do it. And Steve, if you're on Clubhouse, I'd love to have you on there, man. Come have some. All right, guys. We'll see you guys later. Peace out. We love you.